Welcome to the Mountain Man Chronicles, where the spirit of adventure comes alive. I'm thrilled to have you join our journey into the great outdoors. I'm Paul Piazza. I'm your guide through the wilderness and the storyteller behind the Mountain Man Chronicles. I hope you share in our love and appreciation of what this great world has to offer. Here we live in three simple principles: live, learn, and explore. Live, immerse yourself in the thrill of the moment, whether it be overlanding, exploring unique ghost towns, or simply enjoying the serenity of nature. We believe in living life to its fullest. Learn, cultivate that childlike curiosity. Every adventure is an opportunity to learn and discover something new. From overlanding trips to mastering trail navigation, we're a constant journey of learning and growing. Explore. Be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Venture into the unknown. Our chronicles are a testament to the places we've been and the stories waiting to be untold. Join us as we explore the hidden trails, the pristine lakes, and the mysterious places this great nation has to offer. And of course, what adventure would be successful without proper planning and the right gear? We'll be showcasing some of the tools of the trade along our journeys. I truly hope you enjoy our chronicles and the journey that my wife and I travel through during our overlanding adventures. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me today, Taylor. So this is Taylor Blocker. Taylor and I have been overlanding now for a little over a year together. Taylor's got a pretty unique rig and got a kind of a pretty unique story about how he got here with this rig. It's been through a couple iterations. So Taylor, why don't we start just, how'd you get into overlanding and how'd you decide on a Colorado, right? So he drives a Chevy, what year is it?
It's 2021.
2021 Chevy Colorado, and I gotta say, it's one of the rigs I admire the most on the trail, and one of the rigs that I think is the most capable on the trailer. I think if I was looking at building another rig, and I went through kind of this decision process, as you know, Taylor, when I designed my rig, when I was looking at it, I looked at the Colorado pretty heavily. It came between that and the Gladiator, and since I own so many Jeeps, I went with the Jeep, and there's oftentimes I still question whether I made the right decision or not. So tell me a little bit about how you got to the Colorado and where you started from when you started overlanding.
Well, I kind of started I've always been into just, I guess, light off-roading, not really like into rock crawling or anything fancy like that. But I've always just kind of been outdoorsy and slowly started, camping a little bit more, and finally got the job that I'm working at now, and I was able to get a newer vehicle. I ended up with my Kia Sportage, which was I basically just drove that for a couple of years, stayed in motels when I traveled and stuff like that, and was like, you know what, I could probably, utilize my money a little bit more and try camping on a couple of trips, like see if that would work out instead of a motel room all the time. And so it really kind of started in 2019. We, my father and a friend of mine, we drove out to Washington for a music festival, and we camped for the entire trip out there. And we came back, and I camped a few times around here, and I was like, this is pretty good. And I started looking for like a trailer or something. Like, I want something with a little more space, something that'll, haul the load better. Because let's be honest, a Kia Sportage fully loaded with 2 or 3 people and a ton of gear isn't. So it's a lot of weight for a little Kia Sportage.
Yeah.
But yeah, we basically, I just went from there, got the tent. I was looking at rooftop tents for the Kia Sportage. I'm like, well, what about like a pop-up trailer or something? And eventually, right around end of 2020, I started looking, well, maybe, instead of the Kia Sportage, I could go with something a little bit better, maybe like a truck, because I've always kind of been off-roady into trucks and stuff like that. And so I started looking from there, like, well, maybe if I go like a Tacoma, it's the first thing that comes to mind. You think of
I think that's where everybody starts, right? Yeah, everybody starts at the Tacoma.
Yep, it's like, didn't really want a Jeep. It just wasn't really my style. It was kind of small. I'm a big, 6'1", 6'2" guy. I'm like, it seems kind of small. So started looking at Tacomas, and I came across the ZR2, and the two determining factors were, I could get a Gladiator Rubicon, but that's 50 to 60 grand for that. 55, 60. I can think it's 55 or 60 grand is what they started
at. That time they were pushing. Yeah, they were fairly new, and they were, when I bought mine, it was over 60.
Yeah. And I was like, well, that's probably on the high side of my budget for what I wanted to spend. And you look at the Tacoma, and it's around 50, sometimes 55 grand if you get the TRD Pro off road.
And you have to.
And
I mean, if you're going to buy an Overland rig, you might as well get one with a locker, right?
But that was one of the big things. It's like you get one wheel off the ground, and it's like you're going nowhere. You get one of each side off the ground, you're done. There's nothing. You can't go anywhere. There is no forgiveness there. So yeah, that was my biggest thing. Was like, I gotta have at least a rear locker. I can do with no front locker, I'm pretty sure. But that's where the ZR2 came into that. Is it came out to be 46 grand instead of 50 to 55 for a Tacoma or more for a Gladiator Rubicon. But with that, you get the better off-road suspension, but you also get a front and rear locker, which is something I didn't know until like the very last, I would say probably month before I decided. I was like, oh, they don't mention that really anywhere unless you look at the spec sheet for the truck.
I was going to ask you because I knew, because I looked at the Bison. I knew the Bison had it, but I thought it was just an option for the Bison. But after we met, you're all, no, it's locked front and rear.
Yep. Yeah. And that was like the biggest factor. It's like, well, I can save a few $1,000s going this route. It's Chevy, which is what I've driven pretty much my entire life until the Kia Sportage. And yeah, it had, a little bit more lift on it. It didn't have quite the technology built into it that like the Gladiator had and the Tacoma had. A little bit more bare bones, but honestly, I kind of like that. There's no parking sensors, no fancy nothing with it. It's just a truck with lockers. So yeah, that's kind of where I decided to go with the ZR2 over the Tacoma or the Gladiator, honestly.
What I like a lot about yours is the uniqueness. You don't see many Colorados on the trail. You don't. And I think they're an underrated or underserved rig. I guess I won't say they're underrated because everybody I know either really likes them, has thought about them. I don't know why they didn't purchase them. And then I've been with you and I've seen you take that thing to some amazing places.
Yeah, it's definitely something else.
But when you bought it, did you have a vision on where you wanted to? Because you've been through a couple iterations with your rig, and I'd like to dig into that some. When you first bought it, tell me about what your vision was when you first bought it. What were you thinking? Were you just going to put a tent in the back and drive around and pitch a tent somewhere? How did you go through your iterations to get where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, I started with the ground tent. I basically transferred everything from the Kia over, and I used that a few times. And I was like, you know what, I can do a rooftop tent on this truck. I didn't really want to do a trailer because, living in an apartment, you have to find somewhere to store it. You got to, bunch of extra work and stuff to deal with in that matter. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to go with a rooftop tent. Started looking around, found my 23-0 tent, and it was of the most reasonable, but still well built. It wasn't like a Amazon, just cheap brand rooftop tent. It was at least a name brand, and it was built well. Like a lot of good reviews. So when I put that on there, and I used it for, I think it was just about the first year that I had the truck, maybe a little bit under a year, and it was good. It was easy to set up. It took maybe 10 minutes to throw the tent out and be ready to camp, and it was a good stepping stone, like you said. And I started to notice more, like, when I'm traveling for these like music events or even just to go sightsee or anything like that, the problems I was having with it was, well, if I ever got somewhere that I needed to sleep that I didn't have a campsite or I couldn't find like BLM land or something like that, it folds way out over the side by like 2 or 3 feet, which is really, really hard to set up in like a parking lot of a truck stop or anything like that.
Yeah.
There's no amenities to it. It's literally just a tent on your roof that folds up. Like origami, really.
And you're a big guy, so you have to have room in the tent. I mean, you're tall, right? It's
trying to get dressed in a tent in the middle of like a parking lot. I can't even imagine trying to do something like that.
What I liked about your rooftop tent rig is you had it nicely set up. You had boxes on top, you had storage, you planned it out well. I got to say, with every iteration, you have good spatial recognition, I guess is what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way. You're like, you had those 2 boxes on top, you had your bed all kind of nice and organized. So talk to me about your thoughts in organizing when you put the whole system together.
Yeah, it's a it's kind of a big thing. I'd like to have things kind of, I guess, sectioned off. Like, so I had 2 boxes on the roof. One of those was all of my tools, all of my recovery gear, all of, the stuff that was going to help me if I messed up. And the other side was basically just all the extra camping stuff that I didn't use very much. So like extra blankets, dry bags, little things like that were up there. I'd put my spare clothes up there when I would go on trips just to kind of get it up and out of the way. And the bed of the truck was really basic. It was basically just all of my cooking supplies and any other camp stuff. Like if I carried like another tent for another person that was coming with me, all my water was back there. My stove and stuff was in some cheap, they were Plano boxes that I just picked up at Menards for like $12 a piece. So yeah, I started looking and I went through a bunch of different companies. I looked at like the Go Fast campers, which at the end of the day, it was basically like a better rooftop tent.
That's really what they are.
A topper,
Yeah.
And I started thinking like, well, could I build something like that myself, make it a little bit more custom, a little bit larger for space? And I had priced out all the material and everything. And I'm like, I don't really have a shop. I can't really do that. It's going to be on the side of the street. I'm going to be out there like this crazy man building something on the back of his truck on the street. And so I ended up not going that route, but I was pretty close with that one. And then I came across the Alu-Cab stuff, which is a pretty popular one. It's slightly over the cab, still rooftop tent though. And I found one that they had was called the Alu-Cabin. So it's like a sliding camper basically, but it still is, I think it's 1,000 pounds is what it comes out to. And it's all completely enclosed. So you could unload it, put it up on Jack's driveway if you wanted. And I was like, you know what, that's pretty cool, but it was pretty up there in price. And it was something they would have to special order in, and then I would have to drive to Salt Lake City to pick it up, basically.
Wow.
And I was like, there's got to be other options. And I started thinking about like pop-up campers, and I'm like, they don't make anything that small. The smallest they have is like, a Chevy 1500 or, something like that. They still weigh 1,700 pounds empty without water or anything. And that was way too much for a 5-foot short bed mid-size truck.
You'd be doing wheelies down the road.
Yeah, and especially one that has soft off-road suspension. It's like that would not work. And I came across 4-wheel campers, and I'm like, I've seen them around a few times. You don't really ever hear about them all that much, really. And I started looking at them, and it's like, these guys have been around since the 70s. Like, I didn't know they've been around since the 1970s making campers for different vehicles and all sorts of crazy things. And I saw that they had the short bed version, but they only listed it for the Tacoma. They didn't list it for any other mid-sized trucks. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take a shot at it. I'm going to reach out to them. And they said, yeah, we have a guy that can install it for you. I was like, okay, this is exactly what I want. So I ordered that. That was May. I ordered that last year, and I got it in March.
I remember.
Yeah, it took a long time, but it was worth it. It was well worth the wait.
Yeah, I mean, it you'll see here in the videos, it's impressive. It fits on there nice. What I'm amazed about it, I think, from my initial thought was it's cool. You have a camper, and it pops up. It's nice. I've looked at them. Believe me, when I had my Power Wagon, I thought about that before I bought the Gladiator. I'm like, I'm going to go buy a new car. I could just keep it and lower it back down because I put a 4-inch lift on it, and it was a bear to walk in. And I'm like, I could just put a pop-up camper on this thing and wheel it. But it actually wheels really well. I thought you were going to lose your center of gravity, but tell me about the center of gravity. Did it change that much for you?
Not a whole lot. I mean, you can feel the extra weight more. Trying to think here. It was around 5,900 pounds is what my rooftop tent, everything fully loaded for the road with me in it, weighed. And this is just over 7,100 pounds. So it's about 7,200, I would say. And that's if I really pack it full of gear, more than I usually should bring. So it's a couple thousand pounds. Well, not a couple thousand. That would be 1,000 pounds heavier, basically. But yeah, all of the weight of it is still pretty much below the cab, because even all of the cabinets inside, the top of the stove is probably, I would say, maybe an inch above the cab, but the water tank sits right direct against the front of the bed. The furnace and stuff like that is down lower. So really, I didn't put a whole much more, put a whole lot more weight above the cab than I had before with the cargo boxes up there and everything like that. So yeah, I mean, it handles really well. Like you said, there's moments where it's like, oh, it looks like it's going to tip over, but inside it feels perfectly fine. Like it doesn't feel close to tipping at all. Mainly the tires were the biggest thing. Like that changed the dynamics of the truck the most, going from 31s to 33s, and being an 8-speed. The top two gears you don't really see unless you're going downhill, really. So no, it wasn't really because of the camper, but I've just kind of always wanted to.
Well, you gotta always have more power, right? Yep. And you're right. Going even that small of a tire, going up 1 or 2 sizes makes a difference. I know when I went for the 33s to 35s on mine, I lost a little bit. I've thought about regearing it, but it wasn't enough. I still see 8th gear, but it's still, there's times I when I'm going over a pass and it's slowing down, I'm going, especially pulling my trailer. And it's funny because you touched on some of the haunts of having a trailer or even a rooftop tent, right? Well, part of the reason why I bought the trailer was a very similar experience. I had a tent, and when I came out to South Dakota, I had a pop-up tent, and I'm like, okay, I'm pulling over in the back of a gas station, and it's kind of sketchy popping open a tent trailer here. I'm just going to sleep in the truck. And I'm like, that's it. I'm going to go buy something I can stealth camp in anywhere and just pull over. If I have to pull over on the side of the road somewhere, I can pull over and find the street and just climb in then you can leave the top down and sleep wherever, right? I can still sleep on the bed. For you, you can sleep on your little like sofa, which is really cool.
Yeah, I definitely love all of the features of it. So I added the solar myself, eventually upgraded to better batteries. I went with one Renogy 100 amp hour battery, kind of taking a gamble on some cheaper Amazon ones right now, but I'll be going up to 600 amp hours, which that's a little bit more than
you're going to be off, like you're like a long-term upgrade, especially with the solar you have.
Yeah, yep, definitely. I had a battery heaters and stuff like that. I don't think I've ever told you even about that I actually added my own battery heaters to these batteries too.
Did you do the like heated panels around it, the pads?
Yeah, so I did. They're actually they're technically RV like water pipe heaters, but they only draw 7.5 watts each. So they don't actually have a chance to get hot enough to do any damage or anything like that. But basically I have 2 of those on each battery.
That's the same thing I did. It works really well. And they don't draw much at all.
No, at all. Yeah, the 2 together that I have on the one battery, I have the second battery that's coming tomorrow. The 2 that are on there right now, it's like 15 watts. It's just over 1 amp that it draws. And on a 300 amp hour battery, it's over like 2 weeks that it runs without any charge input.
Are you wrapping the battery in them, or are you just putting it underneath?
So that's the problem that I ran into is some batteries you got to be careful because when they design them, the cells are away from the wall. Yep. So like my Renogy battery, on the sides of it and the top of it, they're all about probably half an inch away from the walls. But the bottom, it's the metal case of the lithium cells right against the bottom of the plastic. So if you put them on the bottom, you get that direct contact that heats the cells. So that's one thing you got to watch out for is, that depends on each battery manufacturer, how that's going to work. But yeah, that was one of the biggest things. So solar out of the roof, the batteries that I did myself there. And then, yeah, you've seen me working endlessly on a lot of sewing that takes forever to upgrade the factory insulation pack that came with it to make it thicker, a little bit more dark. I like it dark inside. I don't like having pure white interior and stuff. I like the coziness of a dark space like that. And now I've actually started working on the window covers. I've got one on the back, and then I've got other ones that I'm working on that will also zip up so you can open the windows if you want to, or keep them all closed if you need to stay warm.
Yeah, I love like the iteration because a lot of those things you can get from the factory.
Yep, you can.
Like you said, you got to measure the cost, right? When you go do it, and half the fun to me is building. Like I just added lights to the bottom of my trailer that go all the way around, right? So I can keep an ambient light, but they're dimmable. So I make it really dim in camp, and they're yellow. They can go yellow, green, white, whatever color I want. Doing stuff like that is really cool, right? It is just it's half the fun of doing it. So talk to me about future mods. What's in the future for your rig or your trailer? You teased about it, so now we got to find out. We got to let the audience know what's coming up on it.
Yeah, so now I've got this nice mindset of I'm going to try a few different things. I have a couple of electric heaters that I know I can run for at least. It depends on what wattage I have to go with. It depends on how all this goes, but potentially going to an electric heater in there, even if it's just to extend my propane, for the stove or the water heater, stuff like that, out more, which it doesn't really use a lot right now. But if I can stop from having to spend that extra overhead, on buying propane every couple of trips or every trip, to keep warm, that's what I want to go for. So I'm working on testing some different levels of heat. Like I have some super low wattage ones, 500, 700 watts, 1500 watts, see if it can even keep up. If it can't, I'll just toss that idea out the window, keep the propane furnace. If it does work, that's, just another thing I don't have to go out and buy. I don't have to worry about on a trip if I'm going to run out of propane for keeping warm. And that's where the next one comes in, which is an induction stovetop. I'm looking at getting an induction stovetop so that
they make. I'm surprised. I just read that somewhere. I don't know. I was looking at something where they make a 12-volt induction stovetops now. I had no idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool different ones out there, honestly. And Dometic even has like a 120-volt one now, which from all of the other ones that I've looked at on the market, that Dometic one has probably the most variation in power. You can go anywhere from it's like 10 different power levels, and it's 200, 300, 400, 500 watts up to 1400 watts for the burners. So, if it's something where you don't need to have it on full blast, you're saving all of that extra power. Whereas some of the other cheaper ones, you either get like low, medium, and high, and usually low and medium are still 700 watts of draw, and high is the full, 14 or 1500 watts. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm stuck, is trying to find one that's going to be good, but also not break the bank to install it. So that's the biggest thing next, because if I can not have to worry about anything other than pumping gas to keep the truck running, that would be awesome. It'd just be a lot less stressful to have to not worry about if I'm going to have enough propane to cook on,
Yeah.
That type of thing.
If you had to pick, in closing, if you had to pick your favorite thing about your truck, your absolute favorite. I know I'll share what I think my favorite is on your truck, but I want to hear what is your favorite thing about your truck? Sitting in it, you just say, this is the best mod I've done.
The best mod that I've done. Oh, I mean, the camper's a given because that's a pretty good mod.
Yeah.
But I would say in terms of the truck itself, I can't just say one mod. Like, I love the sound of the exhaust, but I also love all of the performance mods as a whole. I would say those are probably my biggest things.
All right, so the performance mods, we could bucket that on one. I think that is all one, because for his performance mods, he's got an intake on there. He's got a full exhaust on there. He's tuned. I like how you tuned your suspension really well too. I think that was a little bit of a learning, because through your iteration that we didn't touch on is, you just recently finished for our last trip. You just recently finished the back, and now you got the front tuned, and his even with the trailer, his rig goes. So for me, I think my favorite mod on your rig is what you've done with the Renogy system. I just I think so what I'm talking about is he's got like the Renogy 1, he's got batteries, they all talk to the Renogy 1. Taylor's added like automation to his Renogy system, where he's got like heat and sensors, and he's also added, which he didn't touch on, like a Wi-Fi module, so he could be anywhere and turn on the lights in his trailer, right? He could be anywhere. Yeah, turn on the battery.
Monitor all the temps and just turn the battery heater on and off when I need it.
Yeah, that is way cool to me, and it's been that's my inspiration. So, well, thank you. And again, watch the video here. I'll have some different clips in it, and I'll include some more specs about Taylor's rig, and you'll see him. You've already seen him in many of my videos already, but you'll see him in plenty more next year because we got quite a few runs. So appreciate it, buddy.